So thank you everyone for being here. Again, we have our special guest of honor, Designed to Divest, and they are one of our favorite initiatives that we just have been loving ever since we discovered them. And yeah, I'm just gonna kind of let them take it away. We have Shaquille, Michael, and Aziz here, and they're going to kind of like talk about what we're gonna be doing today. So yeah, let me just let them take it away, and it's gonna be so much fun, guys. So if you can, again, please turn on your cameras. We want to see your lovely faces. If you're looking some type of way because of, you know, whatever, it doesn't matter. This is a super safe space. We love everybody, and we want to see everybody's beautiful faces. So please take it away.
So if you don't have your camera on, we are going to be presenting. So if that helps you feel better as you get warmed up, but you all are going to be in small breakout rooms, which will be extra awkward if you don't have your camera on. So just a heads up. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. We'll do introductions. Give me a second. Mitzi, I think you need to enable my screen sharing.
Yes, correct. Okay, can you do it now? Perfect.
Yes, we're in business. All right. Can I get a thumbs up from someone so they can see it? Good. Awesome. Hello, everyone. Happy Saturday. My name is Shaquille. I use he, him pronouns, and I am a designer, art director, writer, strategist, among other things. And I currently work at a music company called Splice. In addition to that, I run an initiative called the Imaginary School, which is kind of an online evolving library, and I do a bunch of different stuff besides that. One of which obviously is involvement with Design to Divest. So I'll pass it off to Aziz, who can introduce himself next.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. My name is Aziz Ali. I am a product designer at IBM. Work on a lot of AI and machine learning stuff. I'm a writer, researcher as well. And I work on a lot of initiatives as well, that Design to Divest being one. Also building out some education for Art Center College of Design. I have another platform called Critical Discourse in Design that is really focused on having those discussions on design's social implications and through the lens of pedagogy, people, practice. So, and then I'll just hand it off to Michael for Michael to introduce himself.
My name is Michael. I'm a scammer in the Virgil Abloh mold, I think, more than anything else. I've been a designer for about coming up on 15 years, give or take. I've done just about everything you can do with Creative Cloud for money. A lot of it is not a lot of stuff I'm proud of, but the biggest project that I have is my own life, and that I'm kicking ass at. So let's get it in.
Amazing. So to start off, we just want to give some kind of context around who Design to Divest is and kind of what we're thinking and how we approach design as well as divestment. So we are designing equitable futures by divesting from inequitable institutions at the most base level. That's what Design to Divest is about, and that's what we're going to be digging into a lot in this workshop. And then I'm going to pass it off. No, sorry. That's still me. My bad. No, Aziz, you're up next. I'm going to pass it off to Aziz to kind of talk through breaking down what we mean when we say equitable and what we mean when we say divestment.
Yeah, so I mean, equity is kind of a huge word that's being thrown around, and I think that whenever we start talking about equity or we start overusing words, the meaning gets lost. You know, so like if you ask somebody to define like innovation, no one's going to be able to define that like clearly. And so it's very important for us to define equity and what we mean whenever we're using this term in order to talk about our work. So, and this is a definition that we have, and it's really talking about fairness and ownership. And so looking at creating new institutions and new systems where Black and marginalized people have true equity, true ownership within kind of the institutions in their communities, and true and fairness in terms of how that ownership and how that is actually being delivered between the people. Go to the next slide. And so that divestment is also another term that I think it's not overused, but it's underused and understood. And it's one side of the coin to investment. It's the other side of the coin to investment. So, and when we talk about divestment, we mean divesting from the inequitable systems such as Eurocentrism, patriarchy, white supremacy, and anything that is a system of dehumanization and oppression, wherever that is found. The other side of divestment is investing. So once we start to divest, it's reallocating those resources, reallocating our mental energy, our mental space, our capacity, everything that we are moving away from. We start to invest in those things, but we can't create those investments without first divesting our energy, time, and resources from the things that are taking away so much from where we should be putting our energy. To the next slide. And so in the work that we do, and if you're a designer who's looking to make some sort of social impact, and you're looking to like really change the way that that things are happening, go back to there's really three concepts when it comes to this. So it's reform, dismantle, and abolish. And these things aren't binary type things. You can reform to abolish, create reforms for abolition. You can use abolition as a strategy in order to reform. You can dismantle things in order to lead to abolishment. But these things need to be really clearly defined in terms of how we're using these things. And to really understand what reform is, reform changes a thing to further improve it. And the operative word there is improve. So you can reform the prison industrial complex to make it work more efficiently if you're trying to improve the system in the way that it's oppressing people. And so you can also reform it to improve the lives of the people that it is oppressing. And that means the reform is going to take on a different kind of thing in terms of trying to steal power or trying to put barriers in place to the system so that system is ineffective in what it's doing. And so those reforms that you try to design, small things that you might try to design, are going to be there to make the system work less effective. And then abolishment is always a goal. So when we look at all of these institutions and we say like these things aren't working properly, abolishment is a goal to eradicate it and get it out of the way. But then we also need to figure out, how are we going to transition into what is actually better. And so the two things that we do as designers, one thing that we do really well is imagining some of these new futures, but the divestment part of it, which involves reforming and dismantling things, is really about understanding the implications of how do we start to transition into that new future, because it's not going to happen overnight.
And so when we talk about sort of how design intersects with the creation of this new future, I think we really want to look at the ways that all of us as designers intersect with this paradigm in the middle, and what role our work takes in terms of reforming, abolishing, or dismantling some of these structures as they are currently manifesting. And you can see that depending on what sort of designer you are, your work may fit into a number of these things. If you're a logo designer, if you're an art director, If you're somebody who works with images, you're obviously going to be dealing in stories and symbols. If you're a UX designer, you're in stories, rituals, routines, and control systems. If you write policy, you're talking about control systems, organizational structures, and power structure. Shit, if you do branding, you might be covering stories, symbols, power structures, and organizational structures. But all of the work we do, even if it's not directly about this paradigm at the center, affects that. And affects that in a way that is arguably much more direct than other professionals. And so we as designers have a particular responsibility to be aware of the impact that our work has and the inflection points at which we're able to affect real and constructive change. And Jack, you can go to the next slide. And this is really it, right? The beginnings of this new awareness for us as designers is changing, is reconfiguring what design means to us and what we see design as being capable of doing. You know, it's become very trendy to joke about how, you know, typography can't save the world. And by and large, that's true. Let's be clear. But typography expresses the order of the world, whether we like it or not. And if you're working with type, you can, as a designer, choose to reinforce that or choose not to. You can go to the next slide.
So we just kind of threw a lot of stuff into the air here as we're kind of really digging into what design is and what does it do. And we want to start really at the bottom, the very most baseline, and ask the question, what is good design? Good, quotation marks. What does that mean? Good for whom? Good for what systems? Good in what context? Good for what clients? And to be quite honest, we kind of say fuck that in terms of thinking about design in terms of a good or bad binary. Because at the end of the day, good design is white supremacy, in so much as it must adhere to the Western modernist ideal. So yeah, fuck that. We don't need good design at this point, and that's not what we're going to be focusing on or concerning ourselves with. Most importantly, we're thinking about design that works, or that functions, or actually achieves some end in communication, or redesigning a space, or changing a perception.
This is a fantastic Amir Baraka quote, and I'd like everyone to just take a moment to read it and take it in. He says, the word art is something the West has never understood, that it's supposed to be part of a community. Like scholars are supposed to be part of a community. Art is supposed to decorate people's houses, their skin, their clothes, to make them expand their minds. And it's supposed to be right in the community where they can have it when they want it. It's supposed to be as essential as a grocery store. And now that we've read this wonderful quote, I want to throw a big fucking wrench in it, because art is not design and design is not art. And we can have that argument on Slack and I will beat you at it. Here's the thing though, there are a lot of parallels to our work as designers in this quote. And that's what I want us to focus on here. Design, as it's constituted right now in the West, is not in the service of community, it's in the service of capitalism. It's in the service of profit. It's in the service of fuck knows what. But we're not, as an industry, as a profession, by and large, engaging the community that we're a part of. And we're certainly not approaching the people we design for as though we're going to support them, their customers, their numbers, their whatever god-awful acronym your boss just said to you yesterday. Like,
users.
ta-da. Design has the potential to play a much bigger function in people's lives, a much better function in people's lives. But we have to start by unwinding it. You can go to the next slide. I mean, yeah. If we're not centering the most vulnerable, if we're not looking at how what we do affects the least among us, what are we doing? What are we doing?
So as I said before, plain and simple, our design, if we're looking to actually design to make a world that is more equitable, we need our design to work first and foremost. It does not need to adhere to Western ideals of good type or grid systems or all this stuff. That doesn't mean that information is not useful for us to have as designers in order to weaponize and deploy in various ways. But first and foremost, we need to think about this in terms of what is this thing and what is it doing and is it effective? For example, I think something that we've been talking about in Design to Divest quite a lot is the role of social media in spreading information in these revolutionary times, and how effective or ineffective putting up a flyer on Instagram may or may not be. I think we can probably all agree that putting up a shortened, highly condensed carousel that breaks down, critical race theory is not going to be the most effective in terms of actually disseminating that information. However, if you were to put together a list of funds that need immediate assistance, that may be a use case which actually makes sense in terms of this thing is working for the people it needs to be working for. And that's just something that we all are always thinking about in terms of anything that we make, and we want all of you to be doing the same in terms of what am I making, who is it serving, and is it working for the people that it's serving, and is it working to achieve the end that I'm thinking about? Plain and simple.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't boil down to much more than this.
And this is a huge thing to think about.
What market you're disrupting. I don't care, what whiz bang you think you've got. If it's inaccessible to the poor, it's neither radical nor revolutionary.
So yeah, to create a truly radical future, we must expand the meaning of design and ignore outdated notions of quality. And so this has a lot of different kind of things to really think about in terms of considering. I think that a lot of times too, we've had this conversation in some of our Design to Divest calls where people want to do some radical work, but they're looking for a job title that has designer attached to it. But the people who are radically transforming the nature of the world don't always have a title that has design next to it. They are presidents, they are mayors, they are senators who are writing the legal laws and things, and they are designing these systems, they are designing conditions, they are designing environments that are oppressive to and hostile to the lives of people here. And so I think really expanding is like, okay, design beyond these tangible aesthetics. Like, how are we going to create a beautiful community, beautiful society, beautiful spirituality, beautiful relationships, cohesive cultural relationships, like with the design skills and the design tools that we do have, understanding design being for community. And then when we think about things like technology, things like design, and how design has been considered when we design, design is pretty much us considering something. Are we considering ourselves? Are we considering the people that we're designing for? Or are we considering how we can actually extract value from capitalism, which is pretty much what a lot of the jobs that we undertake on as designers is doing, is figuring out how we can extract value from capitalism. And so we are considering capitalism in lieu of considering the people and the effects that what we're doing is going to have on the people who live on this earth. And so it's about really starting to change, like, okay, we understand the power in terms of what design might be able to do if we consider the right people the right things, the right institutions whenever we're designing. And consider it in terms of what are we trying to do for it. You know, design is not necessarily a positive thing, it's just a thing. It doesn't have a moral compass. So I can design an evil or oppressive system for people because I don't want them to survive. I want them to be in a hostile environment, and I can plan it out and design that. Or I can design something that is going to be uplifting for them. So design, not thinking of design as this in itself a moral thing. It is a tool that we're using and that we have control over. It's same as technology, right? We determine how technology actually manifests itself. And so really thinking beyond the status quo, but also understanding the status quo. Move to the next slide. And so we're going to break everyone out into a few breakout rooms, smaller rooms, because we want everyone to kind of really discuss this. So we want people to discuss design, what design actually means to them, how it's kind of manifested in their day-to-day life. And so a few questions, you know, how has design empowered you, and do you see yourself whenever you're design? Do you see yourself? And when do you see yourself? Whether it's within a product that you're holding, has design ever empowered you to see yourself? And so whether it's a product, whether it's a service that you've been a part of, whether it is in your community within the policies or politics of it, has a design product or experience made you feel at home or part of a larger community or purpose? How do you think about things that do not exist? So we are in an educational system that we go through, we're indoctrinated into the world, we're indoctrinated into the status quo. And so it takes a lot of imagination in order to start to figure out, like, these are the things that I was taught to live in. Is it right? And if it intuitively doesn't feel right, how can I imagine something that doesn't actually already exist, and figure out how to create it with what's in the world right now? And then something that's incredibly important, as we were talking about as we closed out, what and whom are you considering whenever you're designing? You might be handed a brief that's given to you that's saying, you know, this is your user, this is your persona, this is your demographic, design a product for this person. But what is it that you're actually considering? Are you considering how I'm going to extract monetary value from this person, so I'm going to exploit their needs in order to do so, then playing into capitalism in this company? Or are you considering reform? Are you considering dismantling? Are you considering abolition? What are you considering whenever you take up design? Not only when it's in your life, when in your projects, but whenever you're communicating with other people, within the relationships that you have, what is it that you are considering? And so we posted these questions in the Zoom chat. And so we'll give everyone about like 10 minutes per question and have just a breakout room, because we want everyone to kind of discuss these things as a group. And then we'll come back into the main session and kind of share some of the things that we've learned.
And then there's some additional kind of thought starters as y'all think about these questions to keep in mind as well. So thinking about effective design solutions by quote unquote non-designers. So something as simple as a missing pet sign that someone staples to a telephone pole that has the cut phone numbers. Excellent, very intelligent design solution for something that functions. You can see it. It serves its purpose of sharing the information, as well as providing someone a point of contact if they find the pet. Defining design skills. In what ways do design skills translate outside of a rigid design discipline? So what, in addition, what way do those skills fail? So I think just really interrogating, what skills do you have as a designer, full stop? Like, what are the skills? Do they include research? Do they include writing? Do they include typesetting? Do they include illustration? Like, what are all these skills? How do they work? And in which ways do they serve you in the long-term goals of revolution and dismantling white supremacy? In what ways do they fail? And then lastly, how does the use of precedent inhibit the design of truly imaginative solutions? And this is a really important one that both Aziz and Michael can speak to as well. But I think it's just really important to let go of these precedents that we've set and think about things that are breaking from the long tradition of X, Y, or Z thing. And this is seen in all kinds of disciplines well outside of design. And I think maybe law is a really good example of thinking about how that works and how decisions in the past consistently shape the decisions of the future, and there's no break. Aziz or Michael, if you all want to add more color to that.
Yeah, I can jump in there and just, precedent doesn't predict the future, and I think that that's very, very, it should be a very kind of clear thing. Precedent only tells you what the past has done. And the way that it predicts the future is that it's just telling you what to do over again. And so we really think about what it is that we want to change. We can use precedents maybe as an indicator of what the outcomes were, but we have to think completely radically different in order to make sure that those things don't happen again. And we can't use precedent as the foundation in order to build the new thing, because it's only going to be the same materials used in order to create a different version of the same thing. And I read a quote that capitalism was just a rebranding of colonialism. If you think through, you can find some truth in that statement. And so, what ways can we actually really think of the new, even though, and it's a difficult kind of imaginative process, precisely because through our educational system and everything, we're only indoctrinated into what already exists. And it takes a lifetime to master that and then figure out all these things that don't work and how to reimagine something new. And so this is a challenge for us as designers, but it's something that we should stretch our imaginations to do in order to arrive at a better and socially equitable place.
Yeah, this was something that we brought up in our internal meeting this week, and it had come across my plate from, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the trend forecaster Aisha Siddiqui. If you're not, get familiar. She's fucking brilliant. But she did an interview and was talking about sort of the failures of big data. And it really got at this. And the idea being that big data is nothing different than what's already been going on, because it in of itself is being created by and controlled by the same people who were already running things. And the idea that data, precedent, what has come before, what is registered in our history books, is any sort of accurate survey of the past is laughable to start with. And then the idea too that there is just whole sets of data that go uncounted because they are not deemed countable by the counters. And so our challenge, again, coming back to what our work is as designers, to me is to understand the data that exists and understand that any data that exists is necessarily flawed. In the same way that, there is no such thing as a neutral technology. It is a reflection of the people that built it. To come full circle and right back to the moment, this shirt might get this Zoom call canceled. I don't know how many of you saw the news out of SF State last week. No reason you would have. There was plenty of other shit on. But Zoom, the private company that's hosting this call right now, canceled an academic call hosted by a public university because they disagreed with the ideology of the Palestinian activist who was the featured speaker. None of this work that we are a part of, that we engage with, is neutral in any way, shape, or form. And our part in it, no matter how small, no matter how trivial, presents an opportunity to change it in some way, shape, or form. And so that's what we're going to push you all to think about in these breakout rooms.
All right. So yeah, we're going to start setting everyone up in some breakout rooms. There's going to be about 4 to 5 people. The questions are in the chat. We'll try to send some reminders to move on to the next question, but we'll break out for about 40 to 45 minutes. Give everyone a chance to kind of discuss amongst themselves about these questions, and really kind of just bring your full self. I mean, not everyone knows everything. So it's very important for you to kind of be open in terms of hearing other people's perspectives, and then kind of learning from that, and then we'll come back as a group and dive a little bit deeper into these things.
All right, so I'm sending everyone out, and everyone give me a second. All right, everybody have fun. Yes, thank you, Terrell. All right, back on. There we go.
Cool. So recording is on. Yeah, so thanks everyone. Hopefully we jumped into a few rooms and there are some really great conversations kind of happening. So we'd love to kind of hear some of the interesting things or interesting insights that people talked about, and kind of start this discussion. So the floor is open for anyone to kind of jump in.
I just want to give a shout out to my group. We had amazing conversation. We actually really started getting rolling like probably halfway through. So when y'all said we're gonna go back, I was like, no. We were talking about how design is like this umbrella, right? And there's no right or wrong experience or path of education you can take that really qualifies you as a designer, right? And so we had Devin, who actually got a degree in landscape architecture first, and like had such an interesting history and experience that he got through that education. Hey Madupe. And we were just talking through that, and Chinwe has a background in, he's an engineer, like a biomedical engineer, but like those two things still very much impact design. And we were talking about empathetic research and how like approaching both of those things with kind of more of an emotional designer perspective puts a whole nother like layer and piece of intention behind what you're creating. I don't know if either of you guys want to talk, but everything you guys were saying was so incredible. And Rachel too, and Ashley, we just had really good conversation. I'd love for them to talk a little bit more on engineering and data. We talked about just completely taking apart the government and making designers and engineers start it from the ground up, and it'll just be like 1,000% better.
Amen. Preach on it.
They were like, I don't want any of that. I want nothing to do with that.
I don't have a desire to design the government. But if y'all would like to do it, I fully trust that y'all can make a much better government and in our behalf. But thank you, Katie. I think for me, I'm the biomedical engineer. So I just finished my degree. I'm doing a master's right now, but I'll basically be done with school. I don't even want to go to school anymore. But
Okay. You don't want to go to school, Mr. Biomedic. Like, I didn't want to go to school, so I dropped out.
Yo, okay, well, yeah, you definitely are more hardliner than me. Then let me just say, I'm tired of it now. I'm tired. That's the correct word. I'm tired of it now. But I think a big reason why I'm tired of it is because the traditional systems. I think we were talking about traditional systems and indoctrination earlier. At least as an engineer, and I think we were talking about big data as well, is that we're basically taught, this is how a system works. This is how to design a system. Numbers, data, and not a whole lot of times do you talk about context. And I didn't really love engineering until I stopped thinking of, as a biomedical engineer, you're thinking about medical stuff. But I started when you start thinking about people rather than just thinking about bodies, okay, that's kind of when I started to love engineering and saw the possibilities of what you can do with engineering. Because they'll throw you data and numbers, but then if you don't have context, then I mean, at least for me, especially as part of a marginalized group, what's the point? And I started to really think about that after I graduated. All this, how is what I learned helping people like me, right? If we're just going to talk about, like, I think right now, at least in healthcare, they're talking about, vaccines and medical products, things like that. Well, have you had a conversation about how marginalized groups have been used for experimentation and may not trust everything the government says about medicine? Have you had that conversation? I mean, things like that. You don't have that conversation in school. You don't. So that's why I think groups like these are so important and communities like these are so important. And that's why I think you've got to have that angle of design. And that's, I think, the gap that I was talking about that I had, where I was thinking, how does what I've learned apply to me? That's kind of where I feel design fills that. And that's why I'm glad to be here. This is my first time, so thank you.
I want to jump in and throw a little wrench in here in terms of, like, you know, we're talking about empathy. I have a problem with the word empathy. I have a problem with empathetic design. You know, I have a problem with design being rooted in this idea that we can understand somebody else's emotions who we've never been in their body. You know, so and what that ends up doing is creating this environment where it's a projection of our own ideas of what's true and right onto the person that we're trying to design for. And so what is another emotion, another thing that we can root design in that's not this idea of empathy? Because empathy really then just becomes the vehicle to then propagate white supremacist, patriarchal, whatever system it is. It's just saying that I know what's best for Black people. You see all of these charities, like the shit that Bill Gates is doing in Africa. It's like, you are not an African, like, right? So like, how do you know what's best for this continent? What's best for these people, right? So I think that, you know, it's something to really think about when we are designing or talking about design, and we say that we want to create empathy or be empathetic. Like, what does that actually mean? Are you just projecting your own ideology onto somebody, telling them that you know what's best for them?
Yeah, this is exactly what we were talking about before our conversation ended. I brought up the point of, like, way back in the day, think about cavemen who needed a tool to, say, chop down a tree. There was no external group of designers saying, we have a group of cavemen and they need a tool to chop. The cavemen themselves designed the tool because they had the problem, like they're facing the problem themselves. So like, how can we continue to bring in people from different communities to solve problems for their communities and not have this external group saying, this group has a problem and we can solve it by conversing with them from once in a while, but like have them be a part of the conversation and design with them and not for them.
And this is exactly what we mean by design needs to work. And there's, some of you may be familiar with Kenya Hara, the former art director at Muji. Shaq and I are both big fans. But his enormous tome, Designing Design, reads really well, read it. But he gets at something that was instrumental with his work at Muji, and that I think is really applicable to our work as designers broadly. But he talks about how they rejected very intentionally at Muji the idea that they were making things for people to fall in love with. And I think when we talk about empathetic design, that's sort of the furthest reach of that, right? It's, oh, well, we want people to love what we make and to have this emotion. Get the fuck out of here. Does it work? Does it solve the problem that I have as the person who has contracted you, the designer, or this thing that you have designed to solve? Yes, no, really no in between. And the truth is that if we approach the work that we do with that much lower standard, if you will, we actually end up making better work from more people. Because rather than assuming that we know what Black people need, what women need, what poor people need, what whomever the target audience is, we're providing a thing that is functional. And that functions based on, ideally, input from the people for whom it's supposed to be functioning.
So question, don't you think, or do you think emotions have a function?
I can take that, but yes.
Yeah. Let me try it.
Yeah.
Let me try it. Yes and no. And that's a dodge, but it's not. We were talking about this in a D2D thing not long ago, and one of the things that I said is that I would argue that it's truthfully the work that you're dispassionate about, that you can see really objectively and clearly that you are best equipped as a designer to do your best work on. Does that mean that we should be automatons, that we should not have an emotional compass, that we don't have ethics? Absolutely not, right? But the work of design, the function of us as designers is to look at a problem dispassionately, articulate it as best as we can, and go about solving it with what we have available and the time that we have. And then if we can make it aesthetically pleasing, if we can make it, you know, engaging, if we can have it do something more than just work, great. But that's...
So in terms of the decisions that you make every day, why you chose that shirt, for example, why you chose the couch that you're sitting on, why you chose the items that you bring into your life, why you interact with those design items in the way that you interact with them. Do you think those were purely functional decisions, or do you think emotion of any range, it doesn't have to be ardor, it doesn't have to be like you're super passionate about it, but it's something that you connect with, something that helps you identify as yourself or helps you identify as the person you want to be seen as? I would argue that all of those like reflect an emotional need that design can fulfill, and that trying to remove emotion from design would be problematic.
I almost entirely agree, but you named a number of different things that occupy different points on a scale there. The couch that I'm sitting on, functional. I found this on the street and carried it down a hill. It was free. It's nice. It's made out of good solid wood. You know, that's partially why I picked it up. I live in San Francisco. There's a bunch of shit on the streets all the time. Like, I'm not just picking up everything, right? I have a discerning thing that I'm doing. But the fact that this works and cost me zilcho other than a sweaty t-shirt was the reason why I grabbed it. Now, this jersey that very explicitly calls out a very political thing was absolutely an emotional choice that I made to wear on this call today and to make sure that you all saw this and had to grapple with it. Absolutely. Now, it's also part of a, you know, larger everything I own is black thing that is emotional, functional, you know, part of the semiotic game we're all playing. But then you can break down even the parts of this and talk about like whether or not they accomplish the function they set out to. So yes, does the emotional resonance of a thing, does the deeper meaning of any object or of any piece of work have value? For sure, but it has to come after the function of it.
Let me kind of add to this right quick. So when you say, you know, that the emotions have function, like whose emotions, one, are you talking about, right? You know, with the designed object, whose emotions are you talking about? And yes, emotions have function. Everything has a function to it, you know, whether it is a, you know, so, you know, and Michael's talking about his couch. If his couch didn't work, if his couch didn't function, then there was an emotional reaction to that, you know. So that the fact that his couch is working, the fact that the t-shirt that he's wearing is something that is clothing onto a body, that is a functional thing. Because the absence of having, like, whether or not you love the food or not, or you don't, if you have something that's edible, it's a function to your body. But being able to consume food is going to have an emotional reaction of safety. I think you need to kind of like expand what we are talking about in terms of emotions from the scope of hate, love, you know, all of these things. Like there's a fluidity to emotion that kind of exists throughout, you know, all of our experiences, and every experience, no matter, you know, how visceral or basic it is an emotional experience. And that's going to have a function to it in terms of how we're actually going to perceive the world or perceive what it is that we are, what it is that we're experiencing. So we're not pulling emotion away from design, but function is incredibly important in terms of the communities that it needs to serve, right? You know, I can give you food that you love, like people love fucking popcorn, has no fucking nutritional value. You know, so like, you know, like what was the point? Like you can consume as much emotion as you want and still be in a detrimental and oppressive state. So like, if you're trying to effect change, you know, what is it that you're actually that you're going to do? How are you going to do that? if you're trying to rely purely on some set of kind of emotional set as your main kind of method of doing so.
You make some good points. Can I jump in here? Okay. One of the things that I observe as a designer is the need to almost be a chameleon, but first I need to listen intently. I think hearing, passive and active hearing, is always necessary as a designer, because we cannot go into any situation assuming we know what's best for a particular audience, a particular group. But I think the need to actually hear and sometimes even translate. There's an old saying about, I think it was about the automobile, when they said, okay, what will we need? We need a faster horse. Well, translate that into something faster. What does it look like if you're designing something that hasn't been seen in the form that you're going to design it? Does it solve a problem? Does it push emotion to the background? Yes. So to a certain degree, to be a designer, you almost have to be agnostic, but at the same time, be that chameleon so that you can, and I like your expression of empathy, so that you can come in and not foster the type of empathy that thinks you know how to solve the problem, but that you are humble enough to listen and really listen intently and try to be a community support towards solving whatever the problem is that you're designing for. One of the things that I used to do, and I'm the gray-haired dude here, so I'm old school, guys, is in debate class, I would take an opposite position from my own, because that would force me to research, to learn, and then try to, with passion, emotional passion, defend the position that was different from my own. And I even got to the point where I was so convincing in that sometimes I got other people angry with me and wanted to argue my position for me. So it's an interesting place to be as a designer, to where we put on the skin of being a chameleon. I don't think everybody walks into the room being able to shift like that, emotionally or mentally.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself because it's hard to do it earlier, but if I could chime in, if everyone's cool, I would love to bring up a point too. The whole like danger within like empathetic design, I see it as a disabled designer as well, because people like, for me, empathy really fills the ego as much as it's not supposed to, because it really comes from your own self place. It's like, how can I try to relate to you and connect with your emotions and then tell you how to fix that? And like, that's so not the point. Like, I may experience certain ableisms that could reflect the same systems, but I could never experience like racism or ageism or other things in design or in my industry. So like that empathetic state can be so dangerous because it allows people to like take that I stance rather than like, I love what you said, Paul, about debate, because the whole point is to like be able, like if we're going to fix a problem, or if the whole idea to design something is to fix something, then you have to like get that experience from those other perspectives, and not to like reiterate it in your own point, but to truly understand. True. And that's why I like equity more than empathy, because equity will give the communities the tools they need to build themselves, or for you to just like sit back and listen and, you know, uplift them and let them take control of this project so that like we can all come together, you know?
It's like playing catch and distributing the ball. Okay, I may be the guy that came in with the ball. I'm the designer. That ball doesn't belong to me. So let's toss it around. And in the process, if I'm looking, if I'm observing, even I can step out of the way. And then I can come back and ask questions. I think what I've learned as a designer, clients often don't know what their problem is. They might come to me and say, we need, and I'm just going to throw this out there, a new logo. My first question is why? Well, we just need a new logo. Well, if you can't tell me why, what are you going to do with the new logo? And we go through the, I've had projects that just went to another designer because I asked too many questions. Or their perception of their company was X, Y, and Z. Then I talk to the employees and it's A, B, C. Then you talk to their clients and it's D, E, F. Well, there's a disconnect there. And so as a designer, I need to be insightful enough to look at some of these problems, to listen to some of the feedback that's coming. It's kind of like if I'm going to play darts, a game of darts, and I have a blindfold on and I got earplugs in, I can't get feedback. I take off my earplugs, which would be my own biases, my own perceptions. I open my eyes and now I can see, but I still have to understand what's going on around me. And so I've been doing this most of my life. And I would say one of the things that being a designer is that you're a lifelong learner. You never stop learning, you never stop observing, and you never stop being curious. And you have to be humble enough to know that you can't walk into a room every time and know the answer that they want you to give just off the top of your head. And I've had that happen where people would say, okay, we want you to take a look at some of our projects and tell us what you don't like about them. My answer is, I have no idea because I don't know what your problem was and what you were trying to solve. If you want me to address it purely based on aesthetics, sure, I might be able to do that. But what does that really accomplish for you? So I think it's this, as a designer, you know, there's no one I can't learn from. I can learn from a 3-year-old. I can learn by observing a sunset. But I really have to, at the end of the day, recognize that I don't understand all the answers. And in a Greco-Western mindset, they always close the loop and wrap it up in a bow and say, we know the answers. Whereas in the Eastern or Near East and the African and so many other cultures, they leave the question there because they don't have the closed loop. As designers in the Western culture, we always want to have the closed loop, where sometimes it's like the loop is still open. We have a solution that somebody can build on, and they can build on, and to build on. The same way you have the microchip and things are evolving. They weren't closed loop solutions where this is the end, boom, now you're done. Somebody else was able to come on and add to that design solution later on. And so it's layer upon layer. And if you recognize that as a designer, I'm only working on layers here as a metaphor. I'm only giving you something that may not be the complete solution. I don't have the desktop computer that I had in 89. I'm not working on the same version of Photoshop that I worked in 91, 92. Yeah, I'm that old.
But Paul, I'd like to piggyback off of what you're saying and address something that Sylvia had asked in the chat about the car. And I think, not to close a loop, but I think there's even a tie back to what Rachel was asking. Paul, you had proposed the idea that when Ford went about creating the car, people told him they needed a faster horse. And somehow we've ended up with Teslas. But truthfully, I think that is an indication of the sort of egocentric, emotional focus that we're trying to get away from. Because somebody went and asked people what they needed and they said a faster horse. And that person, in the case of Henry Ford, Nazi egomaniac that he was, took that and made it into an automobile. But the truth is that the need for a faster horse expresses a number of things that a designer should be able to, through their experience, through their training, through the need to continue to investigate, and Paul, as you said, to iterate and to not close these loops, to improve upon. And as somebody who lives in a city, we didn't need faster horses, we needed bigger trains. And that's something that is not an emotional response. That's a very dispassionate one. And it's one that you arrive at, in my opinion, by this iterative process, by leaving that open. In San Francisco, where I live, the the train system that we have is a fantastic example of arriving at that. You know, they just, in early San Francisco, there was no pavement or anything, and they would put just logs and planks of wood down into the sand and into the muck to create roads. And so they just, you would have these teams of oxen and horses pulling stuff through the muck, because there's a bay right there and the water comes in. And eventually you cannot add more horses. You cannot breed a faster horse. You cannot car your way out of it. They invented a way to pull things up the hill with cables that they put in the ground. The cable cars that, you know, they've now turned into like 2 things that don't even run anymore, and it's a shame. But that's a design solution that's informed by not closing that loop, by not remaining stuck on what we have decided emotionally or empathetically that we know the solution to be.
So here's a crazy contrast to that initial question, what do we need? The answer being a faster horse. What if it was, let's slow down your day so that you don't have to get anywhere faster? As we accelerate our lives and we see, okay, how many problems have been solved with an accelerated lives? Well, you know, some people might point and say, well, you have higher suicide, you have less time for community, less time for family, less time for relationships, everything's faster. Everything's designed to make your life go smoother with something faster. But yet, if you're trying to say, wait a minute, what has this really done? And you look back over 150 years of history, some people might say, we need to slow down the workday. A lot of people from working remotely or working from home are finding a new resolve to say, wait a minute, why am I doing 40 to 60 hours a week for the rest of my life just to get a paycheck so I can come home and do what I'm doing right now? Maybe there's some type of hybrid solution here, which I didn't recognize as being a problem before. The brick and mortar companies that buy 300,000 square feet so that they can have workers come in are starting to look at, wait a minute, maybe we don't need this many people all together to be able to get the work done. So again, it's one of those things, a faster car, a faster rail system, teleporting to the next dimension, beam me up, Scotty. What is the solution? If we're linear in our thinking, we will think in the same pattern that the forerunners did in trying to come up with something faster, 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 versus saying, hey, let's step out of this bubble here and let's observe what's really going on. Because what they're asking is not for something faster, but they need more time.
So I want to like jump in and give everyone something to think about. Like we've learned design as design being more akin to charity. Design should be mutual aid. You know, we bridge the gap, we bridge the resources. We are not there to tell people or be the gatekeepers to what's right or wrong, but we are there to provide and bridge kind of resources to allow communities to solve their own problems. We might have skill sets in prototyping. We might have skill sets to kind of accelerate and kind of tangibilize things that are in other people's minds. But that is kind of our toolkit that we use in order to empower people in order to be able to solve their own problems. And I think that, you know, really thinking about like, if you're not really aware of like, you know, the mechanics of mutual aid, it's something to definitely kind of think through and think about, because this is what design actually is. Design is mutual aid. And also, you know, kind of to piggyback a little bit on stuff and what Paul is saying in terms of like really thinking critically, like I would say like design is to me, it's care. It's about care, and caring is a call and response. Right? You know, you don't actually have to love somebody to care for them. You know, if a KKK, I use this example of if a KKK member had a heart attack and the black EMT showed up, they're going to provide care. You know, so care, but in order to actually provide care for somebody, if somebody is sick, like you need to actually have that conversation with them to understand what it is that they need in order to support them. So like orienting things around like how can I care for or create care is going to be around putting the right support structures. But then the flip side of that is care for yourself as a designer. You're designing care for yourself. Like you actually need to critically think about what is actually going to put you in the best position, what is actually going to be good for you, make you feel good. You know, that when you're on an airplane, the reason that they say put your mask on first is because if you're dead and fucked up, you can't help nobody. So like as a designer, you are caring for yourself. Like that is part of the process in order to make sure that you can actually have the capability to provide that kind of support, and to be part of this ecosystem of mutual aid, that then allows people to solve their own problems, because you're solving your own problem as well.
Good
If I
word.
can even, oh, sorry. I'm totally like cutting you off. I'm so sorry. Do you want to go first, Paul?
No, you go ahead.
I was
I
just
talked to
gonna.
you already.
No, I love hearing you though. It's amazing. But no, I was just gonna like jump on that too and talk about that, because like even in our own design fields and like in our own personal experiences, like I'm a freelancer, right? So like a lot of the beginning stages of my career was taking on projects I had to take on because I needed to make X amount of dollars to make it through the day or things like that. And I think one of the beautiful things about the design industry is that when you get to that level of where you can be comfortable, that you can offer like part of that like mutual care is like sharing then your resources with the design community. This is why I love like our whole Slack group is incredible, because it's like now I'm at a point in my own career where I can be like, here's all the accessibility things I've discovered, use it, like take it, or like here I have a project, I don't need it anymore, like I can like, so I feel like if we're all there for each other too, like to be able to like provide resources to each other, provide job opportunities for each other, like it can also help from the inside out, starting with our own industry and then branching it out to even like the people who our designs end up helping, you know? And like, I think being a community for each other too really helps. But I don't know if that's more of like a freelancer versus like being in a design firm type industry, because I've never, you know, it was never accessible for me. So I never went into the agency field. I couldn't do it. So I had to kind of, you know, and I don't know if that's like a privilege to be able to do that or not. But yeah, anyway, I went on a tangent, sorry.
No, very cool. You know, one of the things that they don't teach, well, there's thousands of things that they never teach in school, and that I didn't become aware of until I reached 50 years old. And it was spoken gently here, is ageism. And I find that as Black men, yeah, I faced all kinds of things, you know, in the industry. And I also had people come alongside of me to lift me up and push me forward because they recognized something in me. But at the same time, around 50, my friends that were Asian, Latino, Hispanic, white, all across the board were running into this whole thing of age discrimination. They would go on job interviews and they would say, wait a minute, what's going on? And I said, oh yeah, okay, you're the new Negro in town. You know, let me just tell you what's going on. And that was something that you never were, at least me, I was never prepared for in school. How do I solve that problem? Well, the emotions, like was mentioned before, if I'm too close to it, I can't see past that bubble. Does discrimination exist? Yes. Is the world fair? No. Will it ever be? I'm an optimistic with experience, so I'm going to say no, not really. That doesn't mean that there can't be incremental changes. Now, who do I allow to solve that problem? If I'm a designer, if I'm a problem solver, do I ask the people who are discriminating against me to solve that problem for me? Or do I become part of the solution because that's my skill set? And do I partner with other people like yourself and people on this board and say, hey, look, we have problems and you might not face them right now, but you might face them years from now. Or what about being an agency? I remember in 1992, I was trying to start a remote virtual agency where everybody could work remotely. I mean, the technology existed, albeit it was a lot slower than it is now. But so many people were afraid to do it. And I had Fortune 500 clients that were saying, well, we're going to hire our own copywriter. Well, we're going to hire our own. So that didn't allow me to build teams. I was still able to function, able to work, have a decent career, and still working now. But sometimes I think we're myopic in the sense that we're trying to solve other people's problems. But we don't really look inward enough to see, okay, what kind of solution will I need for me 5 years from now? what am I setting myself up for as a designer? Part of this group here is to have conversations with a number of participants to look at, okay, what is it that we need to face? What are the challenges? Will it cause a shift in the culture of society? Will it cause, what will it do? Uh-oh, I'm talking too much. Anyway, I'm shutting down talking so I can listen more. That's one of the things that a designer needs to be able to do is listen. So that's my soapbox, guys. Thanks for letting me stand up on it for a little bit.
Well, that was really great. I would even hop on and say that our education system and even our work life doesn't allow us to think that way in terms of like ourselves and like how we can think about the future in terms of ourselves. Because in our last community discussion, we were talking about the fact that corporations don't really care about the well-being of people, right? There's time is a construct, and for some reason, deadlines for products are much more important than the well-being of others. Like Raja, who's a favorite of the We're the Black Designers community, it was amazing because she was saying, fuck those deadlines. She was like, no one's gonna fucking die if you don't meet those deadlines. So it's like, you need to put yourself first so that, because it's funny because it's like, if you're dead, you're not gonna do the work and therefore they're not gonna get the product. So it's like they're not gonna make money at the end of the day, right? So it's like, we need to stand up and empower ourselves to say, fuck all these deadlines. Let me take care of myself. When I'm feeling better, so I can produce better work, I will come back and do that for you, because no one's gonna die at the end of the day, right? And it goes back to Aziz's point of, you need to put your mask on for yourself before you can care for others. That's what's up. Yeah, just had to say that.
Oh, go ahead, Michael.
One of the things that I think this comes back to, and it's something that Jessica alluded to, designing as a disabled person, but that, you know, accessibility isn't some fringe thing, right? Like, we're all going to be old one day if we're lucky. And as somebody who is used to being very active and who currently has his leg in a fucking boot, there's going to come a time when we are not able to be as fluid in the world as we may have grown accustomed to being. And so things like the ADA, things like visual accessibility, things like function for people with limited mobility, et cetera, are not fucking fringe cases. They are coming for you. They're coming for you. And if you're really unlucky, none of them will get you, and it'll just be a bus. But other than that, it's coming for you, one way or another, right? And like this is not about empathy, because up until, you know, last week, I couldn't empathize with, you know, having a bum leg, but I wish somebody had thought about it before they built the stairs in my apartment. You know what I mean?
And Michael, I think that's a really good thread to be traced right now, is just, yeah, we're talking about putting our masks on before you help other people. And I think part of that is also inspecting your own design practice, and not just, you know, it's caring for ourselves first, and then it's recentering ourselves and rethinking about what are these skills that we have, how can we use them to actually build a better world and better society around us. And part of that care is just, yeah, being real with yourself, being real with your job, being real with your skill sets, and really digging deep and be like, what works for my goals of building a better world? I'm assuming that is a central goal for everyone in here, but if that is one of your goals, it's really like, okay, what do I have, what can I use, how can I keep moving?
So what Paul and Michael and Shaquille are actually saying, I kind of want people to think about this too, is, you know, these structures that we exist in, these structures of oppression that we exist in, are intertwined, and they're intertwined and integrated in a very, very real ways, right? So when we talk about environmental sustainability, and we say like every company needs to just get carbon zero, like when we talk about divestment and divesting from that, what are the implications of that? Because if we just sit there and say like every vehicle needs to be battery operated or whatever, what are the economic implications of that? The very people that you're trying to help are then going to be economically deprived, because it's going to
only
really
that,
impact the job.
what happens to the Bolivians that live on top of where all that fucking lithium is?
Yes, so, you know, and so I think, you know, that's also, it's a large part of what we're talking about with this, like divesting from inequitable divesting from inequitable institutions and systems is really understanding like what is that, the process and the implications of that, and how do we actually, you know, pull out of all of these inequitable systems, but at the same time cognizant of how they're all intertwined. These systems, you know, we talk about a lot of these oppressive systems in a very essentialist lens. We say like white supremacy, we say patriarchy, we say gender normativity, we say all of these things, but we say capitalism, but really it's capitalistic white supremacy, it's patriarchal white supremacy, it's patriarchal capitalism. It's these intertwined systems that, and then because it's these systems are as intersectional as ourselves. You know, somebody is a Black woman, a Black queer woman, you know, a white transgender woman, whatever it is, there's intersectionality in that experience that actually is going to interact with the intersectionality of the oppressive systems that they exist in. And then like what actually are the outcomes of that interaction?
Let me toss something out here that a lot of times when we talk about change or think about change, and I think you touched on it when and a little bit, and it was addressed, is the consequences of that change. And realizing that while I may be a suppressed victim of a system, there's another victim of that system too that may not even be aware that that system exists. Why would they be a victim? Because that's the whole framework that they know. They may not even think that white privilege exists, age privilege exists, whatever the case may be, because they're a victim, or I don't even use the word because that may be overused today, but they're a product of that system also. So they may not even get to see it. So while I'm trying to design faster trains, faster cars, and everything else because I wanted to be able to solve a problem, there is a down the road trickle that may impact somebody that I'm completely oblivious to. And they become a victim of something that I instituted to solve a problem. And so as designers, that's a real possibility. I've done a lot of packaging design, and I always want to design something that's sustainable, that is not going to pollute the environment. But yet there's a cost economic factor. And then when the packaging is created, it's all created in China, Hong Kong. So it's going offshore. Then it has to be shipped here in crates. And now you start multiplying, okay, I designed eco-friendly packaging using soy inks that's going to be produced in a sweatshop in China that has to be shipped overseas. How much did I really impact the system? Now, when people throw it away, if the community that they live in don't have recycled bins and it's going to go in a landfill anyway and not really be recycled, then what did I contribute toward? So to a small degree, I think sometimes when we want to change the world, we have to start with our world first. Like you said, put on the mask. And our world may just be those people that we associate with in a smaller group. We stop hanging out with the toxic people. We stop hanging out with people who don't reinforce our values and our systems. And those people who are somewhere on the fringe that can be still in that circle. We have an inner circle, it expands out, there's another layer, and that's the real way that I'm going to start making change in my world so that my thinking can be correct, or even if it's not correct, I can be taught and be teachable by someone either in that circle or outside of that circle, so that I can adapt a broader spectrum or a broader view. And when I adapt that broader view, now my circle can expand, but it's not really going after the top of the food chain to change the world. I need to start looking at it from a smaller place. I think that's one of the problems that change agents have, is they want to attack it from the top instead of at a grassroots level where their world isn't changed. And it's the same way with branding and corporations. Branding and corporations they want to say, hey, we are eco-friendly. But then you walk into their environment and you look at the carpet, you look at the lights, you look at their ergonomic systems, and it's, wait a minute, you're speaking from this place, but you're acting from here. So that inward reflection and that smaller community reflection so that we can want to change the world here, and then the world here and here is very important.
I wanted to just add one note on that as well. I think that, Paul, your example of the sustainable packaging is a great example of sometimes the best design solution might just be not actually designing something new. And this is something that I've thought about a lot recently. And I think it's something that as designers, we need to reckon with as well, and being like, I need a new packaging. It's like, well, do you really? Like, what is that actually doing? Again, like, does it work for what you're trying to do? And like, I can fully say that I have thought about projects. I've been like, oh, I think I have this great solution for a thing. I go do my extensive research. I find out someone is already doing it. And I now have the responsibility to be like, great, they figured it out. How can I now help them out? Rather than I am a designer and I have ego and I want to be the one who solves it. So I'm going to go out and do it.
Yeah.
I just want to chime in that. Oh, sorry. Go.
No, please.
I was just gonna say that savior complex is like such a thing that's in the community where it's like, oh, I'm gonna create like the best thing, and this is the only example I can think of because it's the funniest example of my own lived experience. You see like a lot of those like really cool, I don't know if any of you seen those really cool like wheelchair ads where it's like, it can climb chairs, it can do this, and then you see like the person in the chair like shaking because like, you know, just the treads of like it's like you're jerking back and forth just to go up these stairs, and it's like, just build me a ramp, man. Like just do the ramp. I don't want your nifty, like really expensive chair I can't afford. I just want a bloody ramp or an elevator. Like it's, yeah.
And that's exactly it. It's like, what problem are we solving? And, you know, I have writer friends who pass around a quote about, you know, in what way are you improving on silence? And I think that's a good challenge for us as designers too. Like, in what way are we improving on the entire material history of humanity? And if you're not, that's fine. Go find something within the entire material history of humanity that works. But like the packaging thing, I have friends here in the city who are scooter people, and the state of California is about to make their scooters super illegal because they're like 2-stroke engines and blah, blah, blah. And let me tell you what, those scooters do less to the environment. First of all, because they've been around for 60 years to begin with. Nobody's making anything new. Nobody's dredging any new iron up out of the thing. You know, they don't have to be shipped in from wherever. They're about this big. Like, I would never ride one because I'd look like a bear on a tricycle, but like, they're tiny, right? Like, tell me, you cannot, also because Teslas are counter-revolutionary, but you cannot convince me that a Tesla is in any way more ecological than literally any car is already on the road right now, because it's already here. You don't have to kill a bunch of Bolivians and dig it up out of the ground. You can just use the thing that's here. Like, are we improving on the entire human material history? If you are, great, go make that new thing. But
all right, y'all, I think, did we get all of our thoughts out? Because this was a great session, but you know, we don't want to take up too many of, you know, you guys this time, even though I could honestly stay here forever. But yeah, it seems like some people have to run and we're kind of like hitting time now. So I want to thank everyone for taking the time out to really be here, really thinking, you know, beyond, you know, our imagination and whatnot, and having this amazing discussion. I also really want to give a massive thank you to Design to Divest. So thank you, Shaquille, thank you, Aziz, thank you, Michael, just thank you everyone for contributing to this amazing workshop. You all did so amazing, and this was recorded. And yeah, so please collect all the links that they're putting out, support them. They're an amazing group. They're one of our favorites. And this is going to be recorded, so if you want to look back on this, because so many amazing things were said, it'll be posted pretty soon. But yeah, so I'm just gonna let you guys all go and watch out for our sessions next week. Next week I think is PE, so we're gonna have physical ed, so we're probably gonna have some sessions on physical and mental wellness as you know, as well as actual like physical sessions. So I think we might have someone teaching maybe like yoga or dance to like move your body, drink some water and everything like that. So join us for next week and spread the word. But thank you everyone, and I appreciate everybody.